In the first month, I went to the cemetery alone. I left the house holding a bouquet of flowers, clutching them like they were my last hope of seeing him again. Everything outside looked the same, but inside, everything was different. A heavy, strange silence that only people who've lost someone truly understand. I remember every step toward the gate, the chill of the wind on my face, and that odd feeling of walking with no real direction, pulled forward by nothing but longing. I sat near the place where his body rests, but it felt like somehow, his soul was still listening to me. I said everything that had been stuck in my throat since the day he left. I told him about the empty mornings, how even coffee didn't taste right, how the silence in the house grew bigger every day, pressing into my chest. I cried. I cried harder than I ever had before, as if all that pain could somehow be washed away by tears. Time passed slowly in that place, but I needed to be there, even if it was just to remind myself that love doesn't end when someone leaves. Maybe you felt this way too, trying to talk to someone who can't answer back, searching for signs, for memories, for anything that might make the world make sense again. It's a strange feeling, this mix of emptiness and searching, a knot in your throat that never really loosens. Some days, the longing gets so heavy it barely fits inside me, and on those days, going to the cemetery became my ritual. It was like visiting a part of my own story. Sitting down, speaking out loud, even if the only answer was silence or old memories. I know it might sound odd to someone who's never been through it, but bringing flowers, sharing news, or just sitting in quiet by that headstone became a way to take care of myself. Because grief isn't just about who left, it's about who stays. It's about learning to walk through life with a missing piece, about finding strength you never knew was there. If you're going through something like this, please, don't keep it all inside. Share this video with someone who misses someone too, or maybe needs to hear these words right now. Sometimes, a story is the hug we all need. There's a moment after loss when everything stands still. The world keeps moving outside my window, cars rushing by and people laughing somewhere far away, but inside my own home, it's like time paused. I remember waking up the morning after he left and staring at the ceiling, trying to process that the life I knew had changed forever. Grief has a way of making the air heavier, the simplest things suddenly impossible. Even walking into the kitchen felt different. I noticed the quiet before anything else, the absence of his footsteps, the missing clatter of mugs, the way sunlight fell across an empty chair. I never realized how much sound fills a home until all of it was gone. Making coffee, pouring just 1 cup instead of 2, became my new normal. The silence sat next to me at breakfast, reminding me he wasn't coming back. Some days, the loneliness grew so large it felt like a shadow following me from room to room. I tried to distract myself with chores, folding laundry or wiping the counters, but every object in the house carried his memory. The jacket still hanging by the door, the book on his nightstand, the faded photograph on the wall. Each one whispered that things would never be the same. At first, I was afraid to let the tears come. I thought if I started crying, I might never stop. But grief doesn't wait for permission. Sometimes it crashes in like a wave, catching me off guard, turning small moments into heartbreak. The sound of a song we loved, the scent of his cologne on a scarf, these little things opened up the emptiness inside me. I often found myself wandering the house, unsure of what to do next. There's a strange aimlessness that comes with mourning. I would start a task and forget what I was doing, distracted by memories that surfaced without warning. The weight of loss isn't just emotional. It's physical. My shoulders ached, my chest tightened, and sleep became a stranger. Nighttime was the hardest. The quiet seemed louder after dark, and I would lie awake, replaying old conversations in my mind. I wondered if he knew how much I missed him, how every part of me ached to hear his voice one more time. The emptiness was both a presence and an absence, like a space he once filled that now echoed with silence. Friends and family tried to comfort me, but it was hard for them to understand the depth of my pain. Their words, though well-meaning, often felt distant. Time heals, they would say, but time seemed frozen. I longed for real understanding, for someone to sit in the silence with me and simply let me grieve. On some mornings, I would sit by the window, watching the world outside come to life. I envied people who looked so carefree, who hadn't yet tasted the bitterness of loss. There's an invisible wall that separates those who are grieving from those who aren't. Everything looks the same on the outside, but inside, a storm is raging. I found myself talking to him out loud, as if he were just in another room. I'd tell him about the day, about the small victories and the moments that brought me to tears. It was comforting, even if it was just for me. Speaking his name kept him close, reminding me that love continues, even in absence. Sometimes I'd pick up my phone to call him, forgetting for a split second that he wouldn't answer. That ache, sharp, sudden, was the cruelest reminder of all. Losing someone isn't just losing their presence, but losing the daily rituals and the simple joys we shared. Even my laughter sounded different without him around. The hardest part was the fear that I might forget. I clung to memories like lifelines, replaying stories in my head, afraid they might slip away if I didn't hold on tight. Grief made me realize how precious every ordinary day had been. The meals we shared, the quiet evenings at home, even the arguments, they all became treasures. I learned that sadness can be patient. It waits quietly in the background, showing up in unexpected ways. Sometimes it arrived in dreams, other times in the middle of a crowded street. I stopped trying to fight it and let myself feel what I needed to feel. Honoring my emotions was the only way I could truly begin to heal. There were moments of guilt too. I'd catch myself smiling at something, and immediately feel wrong for enjoying anything. Grief is complicated, it brings pain, but also moments of tenderness, memories that warm the heart. I tried to accept that it was okay to feel a little happiness, even while missing him deeply. The emptiness shaped my days in ways I couldn't have predicted. I moved more slowly, spoke more softly, and looked for meaning in the smallest things. Watching birds at the feeder, feeling the sun on my skin, these became tiny acts of survival, gentle reminders that life still held beauty. Sometimes, I'd feel overwhelmed by questions that had no answers. Why did this have to happen? What am I supposed to do now? The uncertainty was its own kind of pain, but over time, I learned to let go of needing explanations. All I could do was take each day as it came, trusting that I'd find my way through. I started keeping a journal, writing down my thoughts and feelings at the end of each day. It became a way to process my grief, to give shape to the chaos inside me. Reading back over my words, I saw how the pain changed from day to day. Sometimes sharp, sometimes dull, always present, but never exactly the same. There was a strange comfort in routine. Making the bed, watering the plants, going for short walks. These daily rituals helped ground me. I realized that even though everything had changed, I could still create small moments of peace. Bit by bit, I began to see that emptiness and love could exist side by side. Looking back now, I see how the first month was defined by emptiness, a space where pain, memories, and longing all met. It was a time of surviving, of learning to breathe through sorrow, of honoring both the love I lost and the strength I was slowly finding within myself. The second month arrived, bringing with it a strange mixture of numbness and longing. I woke each day uncertain of what would come, but I knew I couldn't hide from the world forever. It was time to take those first, shaky steps towards something like living again. Grief didn't leave, but I started to notice moments when it loosened its grip, letting me breathe just a little easier. I remember forcing myself out of bed, even on the days when my body felt heavy and my mind was lost. The routine was different now. Every small act a battle. Washing my face, brushing my hair, making breakfast for one. Each movement was a reminder of absence, but also a quiet act of defiance against the emptiness that wanted to swallow me whole. There were days I barely recognized myself in the mirror. My eyes looked tired, my smile hesitant, as if waiting for permission to return. I tried to hold on to simple things, opening the curtains, letting in the light, taking short walks around the block. Sometimes I'd sit on a bench and watch people pass by, wondering how their lives managed to keep going so effortlessly. One afternoon, I found myself standing in front of the cemetery gate again, flowers in hand. The act of visiting had become a ritual, something grounding in a world that felt upside down. I talked to him about the little things, the weather, a song I heard, a dream I'd had. Even if he couldn't answer, I felt less alone speaking my heart out loud. It's strange how the mind tries to fill the empty spaces with hope. I'd search for signs that he was still with me. A butterfly landing nearby, the sudden scent of his cologne, an unexpected memory surfacing out of nowhere. Sometimes I'd leave the cemetery feeling lighter, other times I walked away with tears on my cheeks, but always with the sense that I wasn't entirely abandoned. Some friends pulled away, not knowing what to say or how to help. Their silence stung, and there were moments when I felt invisible in my own grief. I learned that not everyone is equipped to walk this road with you, and that's okay. The real comfort came from small gestures, a message, a cup of tea, Someone simply sitting beside me in the quiet. I tried to create new routines to anchor myself. I cooked simple meals, listened to old songs, opened the window for fresh air. These weren't big changes, but they were steps toward finding myself again. Grief made everything harder, but it also made me notice beauty in the little details. A flower blooming, sunlight through the trees, the laughter of children nearby. Each morning, I made a promise to try. Just try. Some days that meant getting dressed or watering the plants. Other days it meant just surviving. I gave myself permission to move slowly, to rest when needed, to forgive myself for not being okay all the time. Healing wasn't a straight line. It was a series of ups and downs, setbacks and small victories. Sometimes I wondered if it was wrong to seek joy again. Guilt crept in whenever I caught myself laughing or enjoying a good meal. But deep down, I knew that moving forward didn't mean forgetting. Honoring his memory meant allowing myself to live, to keep going, to find new reasons for hope even in the middle of pain. I learned that re-entering the world after loss is its own kind of bravery. I signed up for a painting class, even though I felt nervous and out of place. Being surrounded by strangers was difficult at first, but each brushstroke was an act of healing. Creating something new reminded me that I still had a life to live, even if it looked different now. The hardest moments were always the quiet ones. Nights when the house felt too big, mornings when the sun rose on a world he was no longer part of. But with each passing day, the pain softened, making room for gratitude. I remembered the love we shared, the lessons he left behind, and I tried to carry those forward as I built a new version of my life. Sometimes I talked to the empty room, telling stories, laughing at old jokes, or simply whispering I miss you. It didn't matter if no one was listening. The act itself brought comfort. Grief is lonely, but memory has a way of making us feel less alone, connecting past and present in the gentle space of the heart. I learned to celebrate small achievements, making it through a tough day, reaching out to a friend, finding the courage to try something new. Each one felt like a quiet victory, a sign that I was moving forward, step by step. The road was uncertain, but I began to trust in my own resilience, believing that hope could grow from the darkest places. I read books about grief, looking for answers, but what helped most was sharing stories with others who understood. We traded memories, shed tears, and cheered each other on. It was comforting to know I wasn't alone in this struggle, that others had found light on the other side of pain. Grief changed the way I saw the world. I noticed details I used to overlook, the warmth of the sun, the comfort of a cozy blanket, the simple pleasure of a favorite meal. Each small joy became a reminder that life, despite everything, was still worth living. Sometimes, the feeling of abandonment tried to take over, whispering that I'd been left behind. But little by little, I started to see that love remained, a steady current beneath all the pain. I learned to carry both grief and gratitude, letting them shape my days in new ways. Looking back, I realized that the act of starting over was less about leaving the past behind and more about carrying it gently with me. With every small step, I honored the love we shared while allowing myself to grow. Life after loss isn't about forgetting. It's about finding the courage to live, one moment at a time. There came a moment when I realized the worst of the storm was starting to pass. The ache was still there, but something new began to grow alongside it, an urge to find meaning again. I woke up one morning and instead of feeling only pain, I felt curious. Who was I becoming in the wake of all this loss? I wanted to know if there was more to life after grief than just surviving. One afternoon, as I was going through old boxes in the closet, I found a letter he wrote me years ago. The handwriting was so familiar, the words full of warmth and hope. I sat down right there on the floor, reading it over and over. It felt like he was speaking to me through the pages, reminding me that my story didn't end with his. That discovery sparked something deep inside, a sense of connection that reached beyond absence. I began to notice moments when laughter bubbled up unexpectedly. I'd remember a joke we shared or a funny memory, and instead of tears, I found myself smiling. Grief and joy started living side by side. It was a relief to know that feeling happiness again didn't betray his memory. In fact, every happy moment felt like a tribute to everything we'd built together. Not every day was easy. Some mornings, fear crept in again. Fear that I was moving on too fast, or that I'd never truly be okay. The challenges were real and sometimes overwhelming. I struggled with anxiety, doubting my own strength. But I kept going, even on the days when hope seemed out of reach. One of the biggest challenges was facing special dates, birthdays, anniversaries, Holidays. Those days came with an extra weight, a reminder of everything that had changed. But I decided to honor those moments differently. I lit a candle, cooked his favorite meal, or wrote a letter to him. Instead of running from the pain, I learned to sit with it, to let it pass through me like a wave. I also started opening up more to others. I shared my story with friends, and to my surprise, many of them began sharing their own stories of loss. We formed a circle of support, each of us carrying our own scars but finding comfort in each other's company. It made me realize how universal grief is. How many people walk through life quietly carrying their own heartbreak. There were moments when inspiration struck unexpectedly. One day, as I walked in the park, I noticed how the sunlight filtered through the leaves. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. Nature became a quiet teacher, reminding me that life keeps going, seasons change, and new growth is always possible. Sometimes, the biggest discovery was within myself. I found strengths I never knew I had, a patience for my own healing, a resilience that surprised me, a softness for others in pain. Grief stripped away the unimportant things and made me see what really mattered. I realized I could survive heartbreak and still find reasons to love life. I began to seek out new experiences, even small ones. I learned a new recipe, visited a museum, started journaling again. Each new experience was a tiny act of reclaiming my life, proof that I wasn't stuck in the past. These little adventures brought color back into my world, one day at a time. Along the way, I realized how much I valued connection. Talking to strangers, helping a neighbor, or volunteering my time, these acts helped me feel useful and connected. Giving to others gave my pain a purpose, transforming sadness into compassion. Of course, there were setbacks. Some nights, the loneliness felt as sharp as ever. There were days when memories overwhelmed me, and I wondered if I would ever feel whole again. But even in those low moments, I reminded myself that healing isn't a straight line. Every step, forward or backward, was part of the journey. I found comfort in creativity. Drawing, writing, or playing music became outlets for my emotions. Art let me express what words couldn't say. Through creativity, I discovered new ways to process grief and honor my loved one's memory. I also made time for stillness. Moments of quiet meditation, listening to my breath, or simply sitting in the garden watching the world. These peaceful pauses became an anchor, a way to reconnect with myself when life felt overwhelming. It wasn't easy, but slowly, I learned to trust life again. I accepted that pain and hope could exist together, that my heart could be both broken and open to new joys. The journey of loss turned into a journey of self-discovery, teaching me lessons I never expected. If you've faced something like this, I'd love to hear your story too. What challenged you most? What did you discover about yourself through grief? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Sharing our journeys helps us all feel a little less alone. As I look back, I realize the turning point wasn't a single moment but a series of small awakenings. Each discovery, about myself, about others, about life's quiet beauty, became a stepping stone out of the darkness. The path wasn't easy, but it was real, and I was grateful for every lesson learned along the way. The days continued to unfold, and with each sunrise, I felt a subtle change within myself. The heaviness that once defined every morning was slowly replaced by a sense of quiet hope. There were still moments when grief would catch me off guard, but I had learned to welcome those feelings as part of the journey rather than something to fear or avoid. It was as if, after a long winter, I could finally sense the beginning of spring. One of the first signs of healing was laughter. Soft, genuine, and unforced. I remember watching a funny movie alone and, for the first time in months, truly laughing. It didn't erase the pain, but it reminded me that joy was still possible. That laugh became a promise to myself. I would allow light into my life, even if only for a moment. I started to celebrate small victories. There were mornings when getting out of bed felt easier, when making plans for the future didn't feel so overwhelming. I'd look in the mirror and see glimpses of my old self, but also someone new. Someone who had endured, adapted, and grown. Each tiny success was proof that transformation was happening, even when progress seemed slow. The rituals that once made me cry, like visiting the cemetery or holding his favorite mug, became sources of comfort. These acts no longer brought only sadness, they carried a sense of gratitude. I realized that honoring his memory didn't mean clinging to pain. It meant living in a way that reflected the love and lessons we shared. There were days when I'd find myself humming an old tune or dancing around the kitchen while cooking. I found peace in the ordinary, and beauty in the smallest things. It surprised me how much life could still offer, even after such a deep loss. That surprise was a gentle form of redemption, proof that life could be good again. Hope crept in quietly, like sunlight slipping through half-closed blinds. I started dreaming about the future, places I wanted to visit, books I wanted to read, people I wanted to reconnect with. For a long time, I'd been afraid to make plans, as if doing so meant leaving him behind. But now I understood, loving someone doesn't end when they're gone, and living fully is another way to keep their spirit alive. Acceptance came gradually, not as a sudden realization but as a soft understanding. I accepted that pain would visit from time to time, but it no longer controlled me. I made peace with the fact that grief would always be a part of my story, but it didn't have to be the whole story. That acceptance allowed me to see myself not just as someone who lost, but as someone who survived. I found new ways to honor our connection. Sometimes I'd plant flowers in his memory, write letters I knew he'd never read, or simply close my eyes and remember his smile. These moments brought warmth instead of ache, turning loss into a quiet celebration of what we had. Other people started to notice the change in me. Friends commented on the lightness in my voice. Family remarked on the return of my smile. It wasn't about pretending everything was okay, but about embracing both the pain and the progress. I learned that sharing my story, my real, messy, honest story, helped others open up about their own journeys. I grew more patient with myself and with others. I understood that everyone heals at their own pace and in their own way. Comparing grief only deepens the wound. Instead, I practiced compassion, both for myself and for anyone else carrying invisible sorrow. There were setbacks, but they didn't scare me like before. Bad days didn't erase the good ones. They simply reminded me to keep moving forward, one step at a time. Over time, I found the strength to forgive. Myself for what I couldn't change, others for not always understanding, and life itself for its unpredictability. Looking at old photographs no longer brought only tears. Now they stirred a gentle pride in the life we built together, in the love we shared, and in my own courage to keep going. Each memory became a building block for the new foundation I was laying for myself. The idea of redemption became less about fixing what was broken and more about accepting my own transformation. I was not the same person I had been, but I was whole in a different way. Life after loss was not about going back to who I was. It was about creating someone new from the pieces, stronger and more compassionate. I took more risks, said yes to new experiences, and allowed myself to dream without guilt. I traveled to places we once talked about, tried new hobbies, and made new friends. Each step forward was a silent thank you to the love that had shaped me. The pain of loss had carved out space for something deeper. Gratitude. I was grateful for every memory, every lesson, every day that I was given. I no longer measured my life by what was missing, but by what remained and what could still be discovered. As I reflect on this journey, I realize that overcoming and redemption are not about forgetting, but about growing. Grief became my teacher, showing me the depths of love, the resilience of the human spirit, and the endless possibility for renewal. If you've made it this far, I hope you'll share your own story in the comments below. What has helped you heal? What small victories have you celebrated along the way? I invite you to like, share, and subscribe, so together we can support and inspire others on their path. Your story matters, and by sharing it, you help turn pain into hope.